Good morning, everyone. It is 9:30 a.m. and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting of council by accessing the meeting, which will be live streamed on our Middlesex Centre YouTube channel, or by contacting the municipal clerk to receive a registration link to join the meeting being held electronically. Members of the public are also welcome to attend the meeting in person at Coldstream Community Centre, located at 10227 Ilderton Road, in Ilderton Post Office. It's not really in Ilderton. Okay. Anyways, with respect to opening remarks, I have a few things this morning. First of all, many of you will notice that we have an appointment bylaw listed for our new Deputy Fire Chief, Scott Roper. Scott is no stranger to this area, having grown up in Stratford, and he comes to us with 24 years of experience in fire service. So please extend a warm welcome to Scott. Nice to have you aboard. Also, yesterday marked the 2nd anniversary of the Oswald family murder, and it is Pride Month in June. Middlesex Centre is a welcoming community that condemns Islamophobia and hate-motivated violence. I reference our vision statement. I have cotton balls this morning. Sorry, excuse me. I reference our vision statement of Middlesex Centre as a thriving, progressive, and welcoming community that honors our rural roots and embraces our natural spaces, which we demonstrate through our corporate value of respect. We are an open, courteous, and inclusive workplace that values and celebrates the varied backgrounds and experiences of our community. The municipality of Middlesex Centre recognizes also that we're gathering on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people on this land and are committed to moving forward in a spirit of reconciliation and respect. Our neighboring First Nations communities, which continue to live as sovereign nations, include the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. Now looking to business, there are no additions to the June 7th, 2023 council agenda. I will look to members of council. Council, do you have any disclosures of pecuniary interest to note? Councillor Arts.
Yeah, mine is on, I think 7.6, the Island Culvert Drain.
Thank you for that. We'll move now to delegations, presentations, and petitions. We do have a presentation today from Sarah Savoy. She's the accessibility coordinator with the County of Middlesex, and she's going to provide an overview of the joint annual accessibility status report for 2022, as well as a presentation regarding accessibility roles and responsibilities. Good morning and welcome, Sarah. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. So I will actually, I think, do it in reverse, if that's okay. I'll do the presentation first since it discusses the status report a little bit, and then I'll flip to that after. I'm just going to share my screen briefly. Can someone please just confirm that they can see the presentation on the screen?
It is.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so two members of council. As you know, my name is Sarah. I'm the accessibility coordinator. So I decided to put together a presentation to kind of highlight what my role is and some of the stuff that we do regarding accessibility with the county, as well as how it impacts our local municipal partners. So this is kind of an outline of what I'll be talking about, as I kind of just stated, which has to do with accessibility legislation and requirements, role of the accessibility coordinator, role of the Middlesex Accessibility Advisory Committee, and then of course contact information. So for accessibility legislation, there are several legislations that oversee disability, accessibility, and the rights of people with disabilities across the province, as well as across the country. So you'll see here we have some of the most well-known ones, such as the AOGA and the Integrated Accessibility Standards legislation, also the Human Rights Code, the Ontario Building Code, Municipal Election Act, Accessible Canada Act, Charter of Rights and Freedom, and Canadian Human Rights Act. There are other ones, such as employment standards, that do also have some accessibility-related language in it. So the main thing the legislations aim to achieve is ensuring people with disabilities have equal rights and equal participation and opportunities as people without disabilities. The duty to accommodate people with disabilities can access goods, services, facilities, accommodation, employment, buildings, structures, and premises that are barrier-free and accessible. That people with disabilities are protected against discrimination. That new construction and renovations account for accessibility. And also that people with disabilities are included regarding initiatives for the integrated accessibility standards legislation. So as a result, we've also had to put together accessibility policies, procedures, and so forth to accommodate all of the different requirements that we have under the legislation. So we do have various policies. So in Middlesex Center, you guys have an accessibility policy, a council and employee code of conduct, and respect in the workplace policy. Procedures include accessibility feedback procedures, accessible maintenance procedures, requests for accessible formats and communication support procedure, and temporary service disruption procedure. So the following policies and procedures have been established, again, in accordance with the legislation: return to work plan, return to work process, the Middlesex County and its local municipal partners joint multi-year accessibility plan, the Middlesex Joint Annual Accessibility Status Report. And there are 2 guides that I've also sent out to Middlesex Center, and these will be updated over time as well, which are the Creating Accessible Documents Guide and the Accessibility Content Style and Design Guide. I will note, I do also offer training on document accessibility. So if that's something that Middlesex Center is interested in or its staff, I'm happy to do that, and we can always arrange something for that. So accessibility policies and plans. So for the Middlesex Center accessibility policy, the purpose is to provide an overarching framework to guide the review and development of other Middlesex Center goods, services, program in an inclusive manner that takes into account the need of people with disabilities. In addition, this policy will act as the main accessibility policy for the municipality and meet the requirements of the IASR. The accessibility compliance report. So this is something that we do on a biannual basis. It's basically to confirm that we actually meet the requirements of the AODA. And so the next one is going to be due in December of this year. This is something that I am happy to support and assist with. And in fact, I believe I helped out with the one in 2021. So I'm sure I'll be in touch with someone regarding that as well. So the Joint Multi-Year Accessibility Plan, this is kind of our big overarching document when it comes to accessibility. It was created with the county and the local municipal partners. Specifically, it talks about progress made in the last 5 years, and then the goals and timelines for accessibility initiatives for the years 2022 to 2027. It includes information from all local municipal partners in the county on initiatives and projects that are being undertaken, specifically to meet the legislative requirements, and as well as any that go beyond the legislative requirements. So the Joint Annual Accessibility Status Report, this is something we have to complete annually, and it's basically, it supplements the plan. So it's our way of showing what we have achieved each year and that we're actually making the progress that we said we would make in terms of the goals that we set out for ourselves. So it does highlight both the continuous achievements in accessibility and the accessibility highlights for that particular year. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when we get to that document. So role of accessibility coordinator. So this is some of the stuff that I'm responsible for. I collaborate, of course, with locals on the accessibility initiatives. I oversee compliance with legislative requirements, specifically as it pertains to accessibility. I provide advice and consultation on accessibility projects. I work with the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee to ensure that people with disabilities and disability perspectives are considered. I identify accessibility issues, needs, resources, and opportunities, and I ensure that best practices are implemented. I act as the main point of contact for accessibility concerns. I also respond to accessibility feedback and requests for accessible formats and communication support. And I help with the guiding of the creation of the accessibility plans, policies, and procedures. So the Middlesex Accessibility Advisory Committee, this is another really crucial role that we have in terms of accessibility. So any municipality with over 10,000 residents must create an advisory committee. 2 or more committees can create a joint committee. So as a result, we've created the Middlesex Accessibility Advisory Committee, and it actually includes all local municipal partners, despite the fact that not everyone may have that population threshold requirement. So the advisory committee was created to advise members of council on the implementation of the AODA and the IASR. And the focus is to ensure people with disabilities are being included and that their perspectives are being considered. One of the most important functions is actually providing consultation on projects. So I do have some information about consultation. I'll try to summarize this a little bit. So it talks about what we must consult on by law with respect to the advisory committee. So this includes when we review and establish a multi-year accessibility plan, when developing accessible design criteria for bus stops and shelters, when determining the proportion of on-demand accessible taxi cabs, on the need, location, and design of on-street parking spaces, accessible on-street parking spaces, before building new or making major changes to recreational trails, on the needs of children and caregivers regarding outdoor play spaces, and on the design and placement of rest areas along exterior paths of travel. So we also have to provide site plans. And this has to do with subdivisions, municipal offices, community centers, and recreation centers. And they must seek the advisory committee's advice on accessibility for people with disabilities on buildings that the municipal council constructs, purchases, significantly renovates, or leases or declares a municipal capital facility. They can also engage, so they being county and the local municipal partners, you can also engage with the advisory committee in other circumstances where it appears appropriate to seek advice on how to remove barriers for people with disabilities. So last thing on this is my contact information. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime regarding accessibility, but I am also specifically able to help with things like clarification on the legislation, questions or concerns, receive input on projects, and to bring items to the Accessibility Advisory Committee for consultation. My email, phone number, and the accessibility feedback form is all attached here in the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I will switch over to the status report. I apologize, my screen has frozen. Uh-oh. It does not seem to let me go back to the original screen. So sorry, my screen is acting up right now. So I'll just have to go off the top of my head. So the Joint Annual Accessibility Status Report is the other thing that I'm here to present. And as I kind of mentioned, this is something we do annually. And specifically, what I do is I ask all of the local municipal partners to send me a list of all the progress in relation to the goals. And of course, anything that falls outside of the goals is also great to mention. And I put together a list from each of the municipalities, and it goes into this report to basically demonstrate that we are achieving the goals that we've set out. Not only is it a legislative requirement, but it's a really great way to let everybody know kind of what's going on, what we've been working on, and where we're headed. So you'll see the report attached, and basically the next steps now is that it's been approved both by County Council and by the advisory committee is for your council to look it over, approve it, and then we do have to make sure that it's posted on the website. That is one of the requirements. But yeah, other than that, Middlesex Center has done fantastic. You guys have a whole page worth of progress, and I'm sure there's more than just that page worth, but you guys are really great at advancing accessibility initiatives and are probably one of the best local municipal partners that I've worked with respect to that. So yeah, it's great. Keep up the awesome work. And of course, if there's any questions or anything relating to either the presentation or the report, I'm always happy to take those. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Sarah. I'll look to council now. Are there questions on any of the documents that we received or on the presentation? Comments?
Through the chair, I just wanted to highlight for council and thank Sarah for her time today. She does do a lot of work with staff here in terms of consultation, supporting us, helping us with that annual report, and just being an expert resource. So we're really fortunate when we come up across all sorts of different projects, for myself being the election or something else, to have Sarah as a resource. So thank you, Sarah, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you for that to the clerk. I think he's covered all the bases in terms of the contributions. I did have one question if no one else does. I've been wondering, I know we have the committee and projects that for example, Scott's working on for playgrounds and so forth, people are consulted and we try to get input. Do you get calls from residents, or what proportion of the population reach out to you and say, you know, our municipality doesn't seem to be up to par? Do you get complaints, or are we kind of keeping up and making sure we're getting people's input early? Or can you comment on that?
Thank you for that question to the chair. I don't really get complaints like that, no. The only one that I can think of that I've had kind of relating to a general theme that I've seen across several municipalities has to do with when we try to figure out accessible on-street parking, specifically on main roads that also get used by like farming equipment. So there's a lot of kind of challenges in terms of both safety and trying to ensure the width of the space meets the standards, but people can get a little frustrated sometimes because oftentimes we end up having to pick a side street, even though it's intended to protect people from, you know, when the farming vehicles and such are going through. I do appreciate the complexity of accessibility when it comes to finding a placement for these parking spaces. So that might be something that we'll have to revisit in the future. But other than that, I don't think anything specific about the municipality, especially not Middlesex Center. As I said, you guys have done really great work. And yeah, we've had a great opportunity to work with Scott a couple of times now through the committee with reviewing the projects and such that you guys are doing. So no, I wouldn't say that there's really been any complaints or even really any concerns from the public, generally speaking, but specifically not to the municipality of Middlesex Center. But I appreciate that question. It's a good one.
Thank you. And that's a good point about the parking. And maybe it is challenging, but if we don't have the conversations, we're not going to get where we want to be either. So keep up the good work, and thank you for coming today to present.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time. Okay. All righty. Moving on now to the adoption of the minutes. The motion before us is that the minutes of Middlesex Centre Council meeting held on May 17th, 2023 be adopted as printed. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Shipley, and a seconder, Councillor Heffernan. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried. We have a consented agenda with a number of items today. Is there anything here that anyone would like to pull for comment or question? Yes, we'll start with Deputy Mayor Brennan.
Just a couple of comments. One on the signing of the Ice Academy of Montreal, the additional ice there. That's a very positive thing for the daytime ice that normally sits empty. So that's using up a lot of that ice, which is a real positive. Thanks to Justin and his team for getting that done. And also it's nice to see, thanks to James keeping us in line on our closed meeting investigation that proved to be unwarranted. We are following the rules. So just congratulations to Justin and everybody for the work that we're doing and James to keep us all in line. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? I did have a question on the same, on 7.7, which the deputy has addressed with respect to the closed meeting. The amount is $11,589.94 to date. Are we expecting additional costs to come in the mail some point down the road?
Thank you for that question. Based on council's receival of the report today, I anticipate that to be the end of costs. We will receive one final bill for any additional costs related to the review of the final report. And when I mean final report, that is from the draft stage to the final producing of the document. So in short, we will receive one final.
Okay, thank you for that. Seeing that there are no other questions, the motion before us is that the items listed under consent agenda, which are received as one motion, is 7.1, 7 through 7.7, listed under the heading of consent agenda for June 7th, 2023, be adopted as recommended. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Burrs and Councillor Cates, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you kindly. Alrighty, now we'll move to staff reports. The first item up is the preliminary year-end surplus and reserve fund transfers, and I'll look to Tiffany to present the report.
So thank you. So through you, Mayor DeVete. So this is our year-end surplus report for 2022. It is preliminary at this time as the audited financial statements have not been presented to council. When you look at this surplus report, it's based on the cash basis of budgeting. So what we're doing is if we raise money on the tax levy to do any of our operational items, anything that was not spent, we then will transfer to other reserve funds as outlined in the resolution and the recommendation above. And so I'm going to kind of go through all the different items with the surplus in a high level and then open it up to council for some questions. So overall, at the beginning, I am allocating it to 3 specific reserve funds. 2 are generally what I would normally do with the general vehicles and the roads capital. They relate to the different departments where a lot of that surplus is occurring. The other tax rate stabilization reserve fund for the 2 million is to ensure that we're balancing the 2024 budget. And this summer, fall, I'll be working on updating our reserve fund policy. At that time, depending on how the targets might change, I want to make sure that we have money within that tax rate stabilization reserve fund to move to the different reserve funds as required to meet those targets. So that work is yet to come. So it is being placed within that reserve fund at this time, and there could be a future council report coming or a budget allocation as part of our 2024 budget to disperse that money differently. So going through the 2022 year, we do have a large surplus once again. So I'm going to break it down into 2 different parts, one being the revenue side and one being the expense side. Almost 2.6 million is a significant amount for a surplus for an organization our size, and I do recognize that. However, bringing it to the revenues and expenses, 1.1 million is related to revenues. This is, I would see as more of a good news story as well as a timing issue. So if you're looking at the detailed explanations, when it comes to property taxes, there's almost $500,000 of additional revenue that we have earned in 2022 related to property taxes. This is to do with all the growth within Middlesex Center. We do budget conservatively historically on this value each year because we cannot control when MPAC does their assessments. So in the past, it's been up to a 3-year wait by the time a house is built to when it's assessed. However, with the work with Cloud Permit for our building team and working closely with MPAC, you're able to get that information right away. And technology has definitely improved those processes. And possibly with the fact that we haven't done a new assessment cycle, that this has been on the forefront of MPAC's mind and their workforce completing this. So we have had a significant amount of additional supplementary and omitted taxes being processed. Additional to that for revenue is the interest rates that increased in 2022, as we all have experienced. That actually has worked out positively for the municipality on the interest income side. So we had a significant amount more of interest income recognized throughout the year, as well as throughout the general admin that function there. We had so much increased administrative costs due to that growth that was not expected. These are things within the clerk services, as well as our tax certificates, administration charges on invoices, ownership changes. It was significant. So those revenue sides were part of that story. The other would be our community services team. So we did budget conservatively on the revenue coming out of COVID. I know it seems like it was so long ago now, but January, we still had shutdowns in January 2022. So in looking at the 2022 budget, they were very conservative in the amounts that they were choosing for the revenue because we did not know what that was going to look like. It turned into a really good news story, and they were able to utilize a lot of that, the community centers, as well as that ICE rentals. So those revenues are significantly over budget. And throughout the other departments as well, I would say the Public Works Department has a lot more of service revenue of the different items that they're doing part of operations. Our fire department had some more with the fire calls and billing there. And within the COVID-19 with that WSIB payment we received early in 2022. So all of those kind of make up that good $1.1 million aspect of that surplus. And so that I'm okay with. The $1.4 million for expenses being under budget is where we need to really focus our work in the future. This is, I would say, a little bit too high for our municipality. I would like to keep that around the $500,000 mark if we're going to have a surplus at all. Surplus is way better than a deficit. However, we need to do a little bit more control when it comes to our expenses. Some of these are timing and dealing with other organizations of when we can actually perform the work. This happens throughout all the different departments. And we have to make sure that we're flexible in that. That's where using our reserves or our reserve funds will come into play. With some of the other departments as well, as we're going through, It's also making sure that we're working on our budget planning. So with budget planning, I want to work with the team this year, and we have some training that's going to be happening, and we're doing a lot more one-on-one meetings. And there has been a significant amount of improvement throughout those budget working groups. So an item to mention would be with our public works and engineering wages and benefits. So we were under budget by about 388,000. However, a lot of that was actually transferred to our capital projects. And so our employees within the transportation department also work on capital projects. However, all their wages and benefits are budgeted within the operating accounts. So they're budgeted here and they're transferred to the capital accounts. This has been corrected for the 2023 year budget. So you're going to see that improvement coming this year. And so these are the things that you're going to see the improvement as well as completely explained. However, we do still have some where we're over budgeting in like materials or say our within the fleet when we're talking about repairs and maintenance. And this comes from the fact that also looking at things like our vehicles and our age, and we don't know exactly when things are going to break down. So you want to make sure that you have some of that budgeted for. However, we need to make sure that we're working on our strategy around that. So for example, if we're looking at 10 vehicles that are in the age group that might have these big repairs and maintenance, and we've seen that from time to time on some of our larger tandem trucks, and those budget hits are significant. However, if we're budgeting for even just one of those rather than all 10, that's a significant budget improvement. We do have reserves in place in order to make sure that we are managing this. So the way we're going to move forward is I would prefer to have it budgeted for, say, one vehicle out of those 10 vehicles. And then should the worst happen, and it happens to 5 vehicles, and we're over budget, we go to council and we use those reserve funds for what they're meant for. And it is to stabilize those tax rates and to deal with those fluctuations, the things that we cannot always control or plan for. So those are improvements you're going to see as part of coming out of this for our 2024 budget. And the other detailed explanations throughout that report. And it is, we do have some where we are over budget. Those were completely explained and they balanced overall because we did have a large surplus. So we won't be taking from any reserve funds to fund those. At this time, I'll open up to council for questions.
Thank you for that report. I'll look to council then for questions. I'll start with the deputy. I see your hand, Frank. Oh, I'm sorry.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Tiffany. When there's a capital expense that doesn't get all spent this year and it gets pushed into next year, does that money that gets pushed into next year, does that become a surplus this year?
So through your mayor to meet, it does not. So with our capital budget, we do a little bit different with our budgeting. So we pay for all of our capital items by utilizing our reserve funds, development charges, or debt if we need to. We don't use the tax base. And so by not using the tax levy, the strategy is around reserve funds. So that money would just stay within the reserve funds and continue to earn interest until it's needed. And so, and that's part of the planning. And now I would say the team's done a really great job of really identifying those multi-year projects. And when, so it's spread out through our budget. So when we're looking at our 5-year capital budget, you'll see many that have multiple years that are identified. And once again, it's still your best estimate. And then, so that money will always stay in the reserve funds and it doesn't hit the surplus. So the surplus you're seeing is only operations.
And Frank, go ahead.
So to Tiffany through the mayor, so what you're saying is the only area you expect to tighten is in the expense area. You want to reduce it down to about $500,000. On the revenue side, I don't think you can do anything with it. There's timing issues. Like when I looked at vehicles, older vehicles are selling for way more than they used to. So what are we at 1.1 on the expense, and you want to reduce that to 0.5, and you're confident you could do that? Oh.
So through Mayor DeVete. So ideally, we would like to tighten up some of the budgeting practices around revenue as well. So as the historical trends get better, it is something that we can definitely improve and be a little bit more precise and anticipate some of that growth. Once again, this year is going to be a little bit more difficult because we have gone into a little bit of a slowdown. And so once again, for 2024, we will probably be more conservative depending on what happens in building this summer. And if that does start to pick up more, we'll be able to expect a little bit more revenue for next year. And that hits all the different departments. When it comes to the expenses were about 1.4 million. where they were under budget. I would like to get that down to $500,000. I think that is something that we can challenge our team with to make sure that we are achieving. This year, I would say there were significant cuts within all layers of the budget and all different departments going into the 2023 budget. We did, there was a significant amount of increase in costs when we were dealing with inflation, construction price index, and we only had so much of the levy to use. Like we only were increasing taxes by a certain amount. So everyone really did put in a lot of effort on tightening that up. So I am more confident that we will be around a more reasonable level for 2023 surplus, if we have a surplus. I do think it's going to be a lot tighter this year.
Anyone else? I don't see any hands. I just wanted to add, we can see our asset management plan at work too, with respect to the budgeting and reserves and capital. So those arguments for building reserves at certain times that we may go, well, reserves can wait. Well, clearly they can't wait. We need to make sure that we're matching all of our plans up and everything's coordinated. Right. Okay. I also took comfort. Since you've been on board, we've really been able to move forward in managing our finances because of the new rules that came back into effect like a decade ago. But it's really good to hear that even now, when things are better, you're always looking at improvement and how do we do better. So I think we appreciate that at council, as do our ratepayers. So thank you for that report, Tiffany. And we can now move on to, oh, sorry, I forgot. Yes, we have a motion before us. And that is that the transfer to reserves in 2022 for the general vehicles and equipment reserve fund in the amount of 200,000 be approved, and that the transfer to reserves in 2022 for the roads capital reserve fund in the amount of $379,755 be approved, and that the transfer to reserves in 2022 for the tax rate stabilization reserve fund in the amount of $2 million be approved, and further that any remaining portion of the 2022 surplus be allocated to the capital roads reserve fund. If I could have a mover, please. Councillor Kay, then Councillor Heffernan, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Okay, now we can move to correspondence. There are 7 items here. Does anyone wish to speak to anything here? Go ahead, Councillor Heffernan.
Through the mayor, item number 6, the MNRF. So it looks as though some changes are being passed down from the province to who? Like, did we already have approval to the province, or you know, like, how is that working right now, and what change is going to happen? I don't know who can answer that.
I'll look to Rob to answer that.
Yeah, so through Madam Mayor to Councillor Heffernan. So I think the intent right now, they're looking for feedback, but so the intent is some of the minor things on site plans for aggregate pits. I think we've been through it ourselves too, that you have to go through the MNRF for approval. The intent is that some of these things will be pulled back for essentially more or less self-approval if you meet the criteria, right? It's to do away with the approval process for minor items that for ourselves probably took, I'm going to say, 6 months to a year or longer for some very minor things on the aggregate pit. So what's being proposed right now, we would generally be in favor of.
Sorry, I'll turn to Deputy Mayor.
You, Madam Mayor, to Rob, just congratulations to Mr. McDougall for achieving his certified road supervisor certification, and for Mr. Wheeler for his associate road supervisor certification. Just pass on congratulations to those 2 gentlemen. Job well done.
Thank you. That took that off the list. Thank you very much. And if there's nothing else, then we do have a motion before us that the Council for the Municipality of Middlesex Centre receives the correspondence items 10.1 through 10.7 listed on June 7th, 2023 agenda as information. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Arts, and moved by Councillor Burrs. Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. We do have to move into closed session. There's a motion before us that the council for the municipality of Middlesex Center adjourned to closed session at 10:05 pursuant to section 239(2) of Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss the following matters. Under section 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board that is a potential property disposition municipal easement located in London Township. And under section 2K, a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, and that is an investment opportunity in Ward 4. We'll wait for the, I'll look for a mover and a seconder. Councillor Shipley and Councillor Cates, thank you. All in favor?